I would want to start with a very short quote from the group Talking Heads. Seems appropriate on a day like this. No disrespect to anybody. And Talking Heads said in their song Once in a Lifetime, and you may ask yourself, well, how did I get here? And I think that's really the key question that we all face today. And if we then look at the 20th century, it was an amazing century where, economic development was unparalleled, not only once in a lifetime, but, once in human history have we had such an excellent century as the 20th century. So how did we manage to do that? How did we get there? I would say two salient features of that century. And of course, the order is slightly subjective. First of all, transportation. Yeah? Huge advances in transportation and huge reductions in transportation costs meant that the world got connected cheaply, and ideas and people and goods and everything could flow freely in the global economy and contribute to this stellar performance of the 20th century. And the other salient feature of the 20th century is obviously fossil fuels. Yeah? The wealth in the 20th century was built on the expansion of the use of fossil fuels that penetrated absolutely every corner of this global economy, and this is still the case today. So what do we do now then? Well, there are solutions for replacing fossil fuels. There are no solutions available currently for replacing aviation. So as an industry, we have obviously understood that what we must do is to figure out how we can fly not using so much fossil fuels. And that is indeed the task that we have all set ourselves. We adopted the goal of net zero in 2021, a year ahead of ICAO, not bragging, but just saying. So they followed suit in 2022, and the industry is therefore uniquely united in this mission to reach net zero in 2050. And I'll stop bragging and turn to the topic. So indeed, I just came back from this ICAO conference called CAF3. That stands for Conference on Aviation and Alternative Fuels. And the 3 is because it was the third such conference under ICAO's auspices. And the goal that ICAO had set for their conference was to see if the member states could perhaps come up with some kind of quantified vision for how we could all promote more SAF production and of course contribute in a significant way to aviation's transition to net zero. And indeed, the result was that the member states adopted a global vision of a 5% emissions reductions target for international aviation by 2030. And the declaration that was the product of this conference, you can find it on ICAO's website. And it has all kinds of other positive things said in it. The two most positive things, I think, out of the declaration is that it recognizes that we all need to strive for installing SAF production absolutely everywhere. We know that the production sites of Europe and the US will be insufficient to produce all the SAF that we need by 2050. So our industry really needs SAF production to be on every continent and in as many countries as possible. And the other thing that we really need is a system that allows all airlines to use their SAF purchases for claims against their decarbonization obligations. So today there are decarbonization obligations under ICAO's CORSIA system, and there are obligations also under the EU, and we can perhaps anticipate that there will be more such obligations in the future. And of course, airlines need to be all airlines need to be able to use their SAF purchases against these obligations, not only the airlines that are lucky enough to be located in a country or on a continent that actually produces the physical SAF. So a key piece of market infrastructure that is recognized in the declaration as a potential solution for these problems is what we can call a SAF registry and accounting system. And the diagram sort of illustrates what that can do for us. And what it can do for us is that it can separate the production and physical delivery of the fuel from the environmental attributes of that fuel. So you could be an airline in Africa, you could buy SAF from a SAF producer in Singapore, and then you get a certificate with the environmental attributes of the purchase that you've made. But the SAF is produced in Singapore and is maybe used by a Singaporean airline in Singapore. So the atmosphere obviously doesn't care, where we use the SAF. It's beneficial to everybody if we can do this kind of, find this kind of solution to this problem of letting even airlines that don't have local SAF production participate in a global SAF market. And of course, let anybody who doesn't benefit from a large aviation market also potentially participate in the production of SAF. There will be more on these things in the afternoon from other members of our division, so forgive me if I'm a little bit hasty on some of these things. So when we say that we have to have this piece of critical market infrastructure, sorry, the registry and accounting system, we have to understand how inexistent this market is. There's no market infrastructure. We don't know the price of SAF. Nobody knows the price of SAF. It's not like you can find it on your Bloomberg screen. So, all of this has to be produced somehow and created. And when we say that in 2023, only 500,000 tons of SAF fuel has been produced, I hope you understand what kind of tiny, tiny little number that is. And it only represents 0.2% of aviation's total fuel consumption in 2023. And look, in 2050, we are going to need 500 million tons. We're going to need 1,000 more times 2023 output. So that is the phenomenal challenge that we all face. And many, of course, think that this is absolutely not possible. Certainly those who think that we will only rely on the current production process. The current production process, or pathway, if you wish, is called HEFA, and it uses mainly fatty, fuels, used cooking oil and so on the top image here. And of course, there will not be enough of those feedstocks, of those inputs into this particular production process to produce 500 million tons. That's absolutely clear. So what needs to happen is that we need to multiply these production processes and develop new ones. And these other ones that I mentioned here are alcohol to jet, Fischer-Tropsch, power to liquid, are not commercially viable today, but we have absolute confidence that they will be in the future. And here's an illustration of the different. I'm not a chemist, but we have chemists in the team. If anybody wants to understand how this works, we'll hook you up with them. So into all of these different pathways and production processes, we can use a number of feedstocks, and that sort of kills the conversation that there's not going to be enough feedstocks around for our transition in aviation. So here you see on the right-hand side the various feedstocks that go into these various production processes on the right. And many of the feedstocks can be used for, some of the production process can take many feedstocks, and those are, I guess, arguably the ones that we really want to, promote in the first place. So the good news in all of this is that given the variety of potential feedstocks, there are feedstocks on every continent in the world. So everybody can participate in this process, and this is really what we need. We need, somehow to make it really attractive to invest in the development of these feedstocks and in all of these production processes. So why are people not investing in this, and why is this not happening at the scale yet that we would like to see? Well, let's just ponder a little bit what happens in the oil and gas industry. So, of course, it would be marvelous if we could satisfy our demand for 500 million tons in 2050 by independent new energy producers. That would be amazing. But we have to recognize that there's a lot of work that has been done by the oil and gas industry, that they have lots of good infrastructure that we would like to put into good use for renewable energy distribution. And, of course, they have lots of money. So what do they do with their money? Look, yeah, this is absolutely amazing. So we've lost the legends. That's obviously my fault. I've asked for forgiveness. But the dark blue part of these bars is the cash that the oil companies have put into their own oil and gas exploration capex. Yeah, they're investing in their own business as usual and developing oil and gas exploration and production. The medium blue part of this bar is what they have spent on distributing dividends to their shareholders and buying back their own shares. Yeah. Sorry if the outrage in my voice is tangible. And the light blue little bit up there is their own debt repayments, because, of course, they are also an investment-heavy industry, and they accumulate debt, and now they can pay some of that back. And that little red bit in there, yeah, that you could almost miss if we hadn't colored it in red, is the money that they have allocated to developing new renewable energy technologies. I am flabbergasted. So that little red line represents 1% of total and clean energy investments globally, and only about 3% of their money. Yeah. So this clearly has to change. And we are on our own not large enough to motivate that change, because aviation represents only about 8% of refining output. So they can totally go ahead and profit maximize without us. If we disappeared from the face of Earth, it would not alter much the profit profile of this industry. So somehow we have to make that change. And here we see how much money totally globally that actually goes into the oil and gas industry. This is the International Energy Agency's number. They say that 800 billion goes into oil and gas investments, and this is 2023 numbers. So, our most pessimistic or most draconian estimate of the annual investment needs that we need in our industry to engineer our energy transition would be 150 billion per year. Yeah? So we need 150 billion per year. They get 800 billion per year, so we only need 1/5 or 19% of the money that goes into oil and gas to succeed in our transition. Nobody's going to tell me that that's not possible. And let's also remind ourselves, thanks to, again, the International Energy Agency, that the 800 billion that currently goes into this industry is twice the estimated necessary investments in this industry from an energy transition perspective. We will need oil in 2050. I'm not saying that we need to, get rid of this industry, far from it. We will need oil, but we do not need oil at this scale. Currently, the oil industry is opening 6% new wells, an increase of 6% in wells in 2023 when GDP is 3%. Yeah, does not make sense. So the investment pace in their industry is twice the necessary amount, and that would amply cover our investment needs, and we could totally get to net zero in 2050. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much, Marie. Maybe we'll take a few questions on environment before we get to the outlook. So I'll open it up to the room. If people have questions that they want to ask, raise your hand, identify yourself. Happy to take questions. Maybe over here.
Good morning, Richard Schumann, Air Insight. How happy are you with the 5% target, or is it not that ambitious? Sorry, I was in the wrong position then.
Right. So, I think that what's good about this target is that it's a target that's expressed by the member states. Yeah. So they are obviously, from everything that I've shown you, at least, if not wholly, they are definitely majority-wise responsible for making sure that this happens. Sorry for continuing a bit in the same vein, but, how many times have the UN member states promised to stop subsidizing fossil fuel development? I don't know how many times, actually. Maybe the first time was around the Paris Agreement. And, every time they get together, they say they're not going to do this again. And every year that goes by, they put more money into subsidizing fossil fuel production. Yeah, I'm not talking about consumption. I'm literally talking about production. So, they're creating an environment for us where our investment needs are sort of struggling against this big uphill. And then, there was a time, if I can put it that way, when there were some kind of efforts trying to pin the responsibility on us. I have heard so many times that airlines have to, de-risk the investments, so that the oil and gas companies are going to invest in renewable investments. That just doesn't make sense. They have, their net profit margins are, somewhere, obviously it depends on which company, yeah, but between 11 and 30% net profit margins in that industry. Ours, is in the low single digits. So how on earth can it be up to the airlines to de-risk these investments? It has to come from the member states. So on that score, I think it's really welcome that the member states have imposed some kind of pressure upon themselves to make this happen. In that sense, we are pleased.
Great. Other questions? Maybe Tom?
Tom Ballantyne from Orient Aviation magazine. You'd be aware that the Association of Asia Pacific Airlines have committed to using a 5% SAF by 2030, which is just 6 years away from now. How challenging do you think that'll be? And what's your feeling about individual airline groups setting their own targets when really the whole industry has got a target anyway?
Yes. I think what I think is really useful with airlines setting their own targets is that when we aggregate all of those targets, we understand with utmost clarity that the demand vastly exceeds the supply today and probably, for some time into the future. So that's another thing that I often hear from certain sources, that somehow we are supposed to, in the same de-risking vein, the airlines are supposed to guarantee the market for these companies. Yeah, that's a very strange economic policy. So, but in any case, if anybody thinks that they need a demand signal, it's there. Yeah, with utmost clarity, all of these airlines have committed to this kind of SAF use. You tot that up, and you understand that there's a vast market out there. So I'd say no further signals are needed from the airline industry to show how serious we are about this. And then, of course, it's after all somewhat problematic, yeah, when you commit to buying a product that doesn't exist. Just saying. So production is really the issue, yeah. So we've satisfied the demand signaling demand, I think. And now what we really need to see is all these other guys to step up and make the production happen, which is an absolutely necessary condition for succeeding with the demand promises. Yeah.
Okay. Other questions? Maybe here in the front.
Ayşe Kalın from Aviation Turkey. I was wondering, what is your approach on should governments provide a roadmap for the industry to encourage the more investment to SAF? Are there any studies on that? Because the governments put the regulation and that's it.
Yes, I think governments should encourage So which industry? Certainly not necessarily ours. Yeah. Governments came together or did this separately and created a whole new energy sector, which is, of course, wind and solar. Too new, arguably, right? We didn't have wind and solar, I don't know exactly how many years ago, but 20 years ago we didn't have wind and solar, right? And now we have wind and solar, and they are the cheapest energies in the universe. Yeah. So obviously we know how to replace fossil fuels. Yeah, we do. And it's more of that we need. And within the more of that, we need our slice, which is about 8% of refining output. So that's what needs to happen. Governments know how to do that. They did that with wind and solar. Why are they refusing to do that when it comes to our industry is beyond my comprehension.
Question over here.
Yeah, Ian Taylor from Travel Weekly in London. Virgin Atlantic operated 100% sustainable fuel flight across the Atlantic last week. A coalition of aviation environmental groups questioned the sustainability of sustainable aviation fuel, pointing out the emissions from the tailpipe are the same. So I wondered how you respond to that argument. And secondly, on power to liquid, which is obviously the most promising alternative fuel, realistically, how far off production at scale are we from power to liquid fuel?
Yeah, so as long as we're using combustion engines, it has to combust, yeah, and there will be emissions. So the only solution to not combusting is to figure out another way of propulsion. And we know the problems with those solutions when it comes to aviation. So for the foreseeable future, into 2050, I dare to purport, we will be using combustion engines. And then the only option we have is to make sure, if we can, that these combustion engines can run on fuel that is itself sustainable. So we replace the fossil fuel jet stuff that goes into the planes today with something else that is not of fossil origin. That is the maximum that we can do as long as we use combustion engines. Yeah. And then, how quickly these other solutions for making sustainable aviation fuels are going to become commercial obviously depends on the money that goes in, right? So I think that there's, maybe even an exponential relationship there. Yeah. If we can channel more investments into those areas, I would think that they can become commercially mature much faster. And there's also a misconception, I believe, regarding sustainable aviation fuels, that they will disappear, And there I think that there's a confusion about, the share of the total. It's true that now in the early stages, the total contributions to our decarbonization will, the vast majority of those contributions will come from sustainable aviation fuels. And then going into the future, that share will decline, but that doesn't mean that the absolute amount declines. Yeah. So SAF is here to stay, and these other technologies, could actually surprise us on the upside. That is possible, and I think, I take great hope in the experience with wind and solar. The only thing is that it has to happen even faster.
I think the issue with sustainable aviation fuel that's important to recognize is that it has been accepted by governments as a credible pathway for the aviation industry. And the issue here is that we're in effect recycling the CO2. We're recycling the carbon. So we're not adding new carbon to the atmosphere, which is the challenge that everybody has faced. How do we stop pumping additional carbon into the atmosphere? And that's why sustainable aviation fuel is a credible option for us, because it's recycling CO2 or carbon that's already there rather than adding new carbon from fossil fuel.
Okay, other questions? Take one over there.
Hi, Joanna Pluchinska from Reuters. Neste has said that they're going to have too much supply of SAF by 2028, and some investors say that uptake agreements are actually slowing down between airlines and SAF producers. What's behind that? Do you think that airlines are losing interest because of the investment environment? And this kind of, Neste seems to say something different than what you're saying. So what's actually happening?
Yeah, I mean, I can't really, fathom why or how they can say something like that. So I can't really answer your question directly because I can only see this great lack of SAF. Yeah, that's the only thing I can see. And that anybody can think that we will have too much SAF in 28, I really do not understand what kind of analysis they are basing that on. And, maybe it could be sort of this local or global issue, right? So if the SAF market is, geographically based, you as a potential energy producer, you will want to put your SAF plant in the largest aviation market, yeah? Because that's where people will be able to buy it and put it in their airplanes. And this is really problematic, for the rest of us who don't fit those criteria. So what we need is to give potential SAF producers in countries with small aviation markets access to a global SAF market. Yeah. So if you're in Africa, your airline is small, not very interesting investment proposition to build a plant there, but then you think, but if I can sell to the world as a whole, it obviously changes my future demand picture. So that's the only thing I can imagine. If they're just thinking Singapore, yeah, for sure. At some point, if they have lots of production in Singapore, it will exceed probably at some point the demand of Singapore Airlines. But then if we have, if we manage to give access to that supply also to airlines who are not so fortunate, then that excess supply will be quickly absorbed.
Yeah, I think this is nonsense from Neste, complete nonsense. And all you have to do is look at the agreements that airlines continue to sign today. So there's no lack of appetite. Every day you'll hear a new commitment by an airline to purchase sustainable aviation fuel. Neste is a commercial entity, so maybe they're just trying to focus on some challenges that they have. But I can assure you, every drop of sustainable fuel that's produced has been used and will be used. So, Neste should continue to produce, and there's no doubt that there will continue to be huge demand, not just in 2028 and beyond. So I don't see any issue whatsoever here. We have airlines in Europe entering into contracts to buy sustainable aviation fuel in the US because they can't get it in Europe. So to fulfill the commitments that they have made, they're going out around the world trying to purchase sustainable aviation fuel. So, Neste, quite honestly, is just talking nonsense.
That's plain talking. I love it. And, let's just, what was I going to say now? Sudden brain freeze. I had a cool thing to share, but maybe it'll come back.
All right, we'll take 2 more questions and then we'll move on to the outlook, and then we've got a long session after that for questions. So maybe one here and one in the front.
Good morning, Marie. This is Andreas from FEW Hamburg. As far as the alliance between airlines and big corporates is concerned, that the airlines convince the big companies, like Siemens, whatever, to purchase SAF for their business travelers. I remember there were some efforts in the past. How is this process going on? So what is your observation on that?
Yeah, we would obviously love everybody to be part of aviation's transition and help finance it, for sure. But this is a little bit problematic, We basically, again, we're living in a highly supply-constrained environment where there just isn't enough SAF. So what we do not want is bigger companies with more money than what we have to step in and buy lots of SAF and sort of squeeze us out of the market or increase the already hefty price of SAF that we pay today. So actually this the SAF registry and accounting system that I showed earlier would be a system where we can accommodate all of that in one handy package. So we definitely want to invite them in, but we can, thanks to such a system, use the same batch of SAF for airlines claiming that against their what's called Scope 1 obligations, and then airlines can invite their customers to claim against the customer's Scope 3 voluntary or maybe obligatory decarbonization. And I just wanted to mention the cost. That's what I was momentarily thinking of a few moments ago. Yeah. So obviously, I think we're clearly a hard to abate, as it's called, industry. You know, not super easy, not tons of solutions today for how to decarbonize aviation. And other hard to abate industries are obviously cement and steel and so on, right? Lime, whatever, lots of them. And of all industries, actually, I'm not aware of any industry that has committed as much money as our industry has committed to this process. And you know, we paid probably 500 million more on the fuel bill last year because of SAF. Maybe it's about 750 million more this year. And obviously, it will continue to rise. So here, too, we understand, you know, that there's a very, very keen self-interest here for the airlines. Yeah, anybody who doubts our commitments, I just don't get it, right? What we need is maximum SAF production so that this can achieve some kind of scale, so that the price can fall, so that we don't necessarily have to continue to pay this premium over jet fuel forever. That's clearly the mission here. And under CORSIA, the very inspired program that ICAO agreed upon back in 2016, yeah? You know, do you realize how early that was in these types of discussions? And under CORSIA, we estimate that between 24 and 35, the industry might pay somewhere between 20 and 30 billion towards its obligations under CORSIA. So, you know, I'm bragging again, but, you know, show me somebody else, show me another industry, and then I will eat somebody's hat.
Great. We'll take one last question in the front, and then we'll move on to the outline.
2.4 billion next year, sorry, is the estimated extra cost next year for our SAF consumption. Thank you.
Sally Gethin of Gethin's In-Flight News. Of course, the other side, almost hidden side of the sustainability journey for airlines is aircraft contrails, which is now emerging as an actor or a catalyst in global warming, not necessarily carbon emissions. And there's a lot of interesting early work going on, a lot of it pioneered by academics and universities, for example, in Europe, on the effect of contrails and the work to actually measure them to be able to create solutions to that. So does IATA see a role for itself in this whole new science, if you like, about contrails? And if so, what does that look like? Thank you.
Yes, we clearly need to understand all the science that pertains to our industry and our industry's both financial and environmental sustainability. Yeah, so we're keenly invested in anything that affects our financial and environmental sustainability. So we obviously have, you know, people in our team who devote lots of time to studying these things. We form all kinds of collaborations with various universities and other experts in all the fields that are relevant to our quest. And that includes, obviously, the non-CO2 emissions issue. And, you know, even the father of non-CO2 emissions analysis have said that, you know, it would be insane to deviate a single plane today because of assumptions regarding this, because the science is so immature. And when we look at, you know, the various measurements that are made today and their likelihood of being correct, in the aggregate, they have about a 30% likelihood of being correct. So we cannot make policy today on, you know, on something that we only have a 30% chance of being right about, yeah? And therefore, obviously, a 70% chance of being wrong. So we are certainly keen on this science maturing. We are certainly keen on good policies emerging in due course, but we are absolutely not at all keen on, hasty policies cobbled together based on insufficient information. So we are completely invested in trying to make the information available. And, today there are perhaps 8 aircraft in the universe that can actually measure to some degree humidity in the zone where aircraft are flying. So, and this humidity measurement is one of the key measurements that we need to be able to understand this. So that gives you perhaps a measure of how far we are away from being able to do this in a science-based and data-driven way, which is obviously what we always promote.
Yeah, Murray has covered this. This isn't new. We've been talking about this in the industry for 25, 30 years. We know that contrails form in areas of high supersaturation, so it's not everywhere. We know that contrails can have a cooling effect, depending on what time they've created, or a warming effect. So as Murray said, the science is still quite immature. It's developing and developing quickly, but to take decisions today based on an immature assessment of the science would be a mistake, because anything that would deal with avoiding contrails is likely to lead to an increase in CO2 production. So we know CO2, the science around CO2 is absolutely clear. We've yet to see firm evidence and research that would support us doing it, but we are doing a lot of work in the area of non-CO2. So the industry is not silent or deaf to this. As I said, we've been looking at this for at least 25, if not 30 years.